You can never have too many wings, and the small forward market is a fascinating one for the Pacers to look at. Let's dive into it. Why the Pacers would sign a three, who are the best options on the market, what are some realistic picks. Alex Golden from Setting the Pace is going to join us to talk about it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Wednesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we are diving back in to free agency by position for the Pacers today, looking at the small forward market. Wings who can play the four, wings who can play the two. Always so valuable for teams to have as many of these that can reasonably play as possible. Can the Pacers get a good one? Is it even possible with their resources? What market factors do they need to consider? How will they approach this? Who are the best players? We dive into all that, including lengthy discussions on a few guys. Alex Golden from Setting the Pace joins us to do it all. Him and I talked on Setting the Pace earlier this week. Highly recommend you guys listen to that. And today, we team up to talk some small forwards. We get into all the dynamics of Aaron Nesmith, other Pacers free agents, young guys waiting for opportunities, and get into the market using Spotrac's list of small forwards. So if you don't think we say someone's name we should have, they were either already in the shooting guards episode or they'll be in the power forwards episode next week. So let's dive in, talking small forward free agency with Alex Golden. It is time to talk about wings. Boneless, bone in. That's the classic joke to make, but really wings for the Pacers as we dive in to the small forward free agency market. I did the guards by myself. A little boring because the Pacers have a lot of guards and not a lot of minutes to offer. And by not a lot, I mean zero. Maybe they don't have many on the wings, but maybe they do with an outbound three on the market right now. Who knows what that will look like? And you can always play threes at other positions. They are the most important threes or fours position in the league. And there's a lot to dive into on the small forward market. So I need more than just my mind for this, and joining me to break it all down. You might have just heard us together over on Setting the Pace. If you didn't, you've heard his voice many a time here or on his podcast before. It's Alex Golden from Setting the Pace. Alex, I think I know your answer from many a terrible internet discussion, but I believe you are a boneless guy. Is that correct?
No, I actually like both. I do like both.
Who was the? Oh, it was Rhett, right? Rhett and Derek are boneless.
Or Mark Schindler, right?
Schindler was a boneless dork for sure. Yes.
I mean, I'll eat boneless.
It's Mark Schindler.
It's always Mark Schindler with bad food takes. Now, have you seen the buy one get one free or whatever it is at B-Dubs on Mondays?
No, I have not.
So I actually went with my friend, and it's like I think it's all you can eat. Not buy one get one free. It's all you can eat, and it's like $20, and you can literally. I think you have to order two sauces and you get fries. And then if you want more, they come out and say, well, what sauce do you want? So they just keep bringing you different sauces. Now, I don't know how much more beneficial it is because you can't take anything home and you can't share with anybody. So I don't know how many wings you can eat now. It is just boneless, but I don't know how many you can actually eat in one setting. But I don't know if it's much cheaper than doing the, buy one, get one free that they do on Thursdays with their traditional boneless wings.
On the same token, how many wings can the Pacers fit in without sharing any or leaving the building with too many? That's a good point. I haven't been to B-Dubs in a long time. My fiance is a hater. So the Pacers, as it stands, Aaron Nesmith clearly going to be playing and probably quite a bit at the three spot. As currently constructed, probably Ben Shepherd would be the backup, although you could argue he could play the two. Maybe Jarris Walker's a backup. You could argue he could play the four. There's already some dynamic factors on what their three spot specifically will look like. So that's argument one to at least dive into the position. And argument two would be you can literally never have too many guys at this spot, right? Like a lot of teams hope to have the Celtics, for example, who are the finals right now, have an ex-Pacer who could frequently play the three for them. That is not in their rotation in O'Shea Brissett. It is always good to have wings that you can play in case of an emergency. In the Pacers case, Doug McDermott played in more than emergency situations. He was in the rotation quite often, and he is a free agent who we'll bring up today. But having more is generally always good at this spot. Heck, Kendall Brown, you could argue, is a three, and he might be a free agent this summer. So before we even get into the specifics of players available and all that, it's so obvious to me that if you can get a wing at a price that makes sense, you should do it. And then I mean, unless it suppresses a player that it shouldn't, figure out the next steps from there.
No, I mean, I think if you look at this Pacers roster, you could say that aside from hoping that Jarris Walker could become that three, they don't really have a three on the roster still at this point. They've
Wow.
they've
Aaron Nesmith's not a 3?
6'5". I mean, is he a little bit too small for his the 3 position? Would he be better as a 2?
He's close.
He's close. But when you think of bigger guys like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, he had trouble with those guys. So could you use somebody that's a little bit bigger at the 3? That's kind of where I'm looking at if you're looking for a long-term starting position 3. And that's why I said you could make the case. Not saying it's totally there because everything's subject. And with positionless basketball, everything is not what it used to be in terms of standard positions. But yeah, the Pacers definitely, I think the 3 position is something they really still haven't solidified in that starting 5. They definitely have their point guard and their power forward, probably their center too. But, shooting guard, is that going to be Nembhard moving forward? You would think after the season he had, the postseason that he had, probably. But the 3, Aaron Nesmith, good player, really good player. But, there's some things about his game that makes you wonder, is he the long-term answer there? Not sure the Pacers can really go out there and get the long-term answer in free agency right now. But I will say the small forward position is something that I think could be upgraded and something this team still needs to look at.
Yeah, usually I'm team you are who you guard in terms of your most common position. That's why, Shepherd largely more 2, but can be a 3, and Nesmith guarded 3s, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes out of that being the correct choice. That's not always how player positions should be classified, but Nesmith can guard most 3s. But Nesmith is actually an interesting person to talk about when you think ahead about this market, because the Pacers, unless disaster strikes, can't have cap space. And even if they do, it won't be enough to get any of the, and by any, I mean the 1 or 2 legitimately very good 3s on the market this year. And so likely, almost certainly, their resource to acquire someone very talented or fairly talented would be the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. And the question with that specifically is, could it on this free agent market get someone better than Aaron Nesmith? I'll start out now by saying no. Most likely, almost certainly, actually, it can't. And so then you're at the question of, if you do use big resources to get a 3, because there's reason to say they need another one, then you have to ask, is it worth having that player to then not play someone young like Ben Shepherd, like Ben Mathurin, like Jarris Walker, or like whoever? And so it's a really kind of awkward balance of like figuring out what you'd want, because you want good players on the wing. Every team does. But how do you allocate the right resources to make it happen? And if there is someone better than Nesmith, that's great. Try, but can you get that with what you have? Almost certainly no. So how they approach that part of this, because obviously they want wings, every team does, will be interesting to me.
And that's kind of what I was talking about. Like, it's just, who are you going to find an upgrade of over Nesmith in the free agency market? Probably nobody. Could be currently on the roster if players develop and kind of reach that ceiling that might be higher than Aaron Nesmith's ceiling is. But at the same time, you're not really, I mean, if you're the Pacers, you shouldn't really be losing any sleep if you run it back with Aaron Nesmith as your starting small forward. Like, he
Not at all.
showed that he's very capable of doing some special things. And, defensively in the playoffs, he was a lot better. More physical game kind of benefits him a little bit more. But yeah, just overall, I think that with the small forwards, Shep did a good job. I think we saw a very small flash in the pan with Jarris Walker against Paul George and the Clippers. But, could he continue to develop and become that guy that they wanted to, or that they saw when they were drafting him? So that to me is where it's interesting. But like with this free agent market, there's not a lot of guys on this list that you could say, oh, I would start him over Aaron Nesmith. There's maybe 1, maybe 2, probably 2 on this list that I would look at and say, yeah, I'd probably start him over Aaron Nesmith if he were available. But that's about it.
Can't get him.
If you can get him, huh?
Can't get him either.
Yeah, you can't get either of them. So, and that's where it's interesting. Now, I know we're going to talk about other wings that we probably can't get later, so I'll save that question for then. But when you look at Aaron Nesmith, I just feel like there was some times where I really wished he was just 2 inches taller, had a little bit longer wingspan.
And Aaron Nesmith wishes that too.
Yes. So he definitely does. He's probably making more than $11 million if that were the case. So
yeah.
But still, I mean, even times he played the small ball forward, and it worked out okay for Indiana in moments. So, really good player to have. Aaron Nesmith. Ben Shepherd really kind of showed his worth as a rookie. Doug McDermott, 32 and a half years old, 4th oldest player in the small forward free agent list here that we're going off of. It's just kind of funny that
Yeah.
he's the fourth highest one. Don't necessarily see him getting that contract.
So, yeah, it's funny with Neesmith to think back on a year ago when Buddy Hield and Bruce Brown were in the mix, when people built, including me, were building out the Pacers rotation. Like, is this guy going to play? And then it's like, oh, yes, he should play a lot. So what a change in a year for him. The final factor here before we dig into the actual list of free agents is one, potentially two of the Pacers' 4 free agents are this position. And I'll get into little more detail on these two tomorrow, but Doug McDermott, like if he would take a minimum and accept that he would be behind Walker and not playing, like I guess sure, but who knows what his future looks like after how his tenure went. You can hear more about that from Kalen Cooper and I from Monday's episode of this week. And then Kendall Brown is, they liked him enough to trade for him in the draft. He's on a standard deal. I don't really know what to make of him unless he's amazing in summer league. So that could be another reason to need a wing is you lose 2. You need one, even if it's somebody who's not going to play at all, just to have one on the team. And I suppose there's merit to it being one of those guys, but maybe someone else makes sense too.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be surprised at the Brown McDermott back, right? I mean, I think that it could make sense, like you said.
It's just hard to imagine that the money and role is what he would want right now. You know what I mean? It's not the most he could get or the most minutes he could presumably get.
Yeah, and I don't really know if it's the right player the Pacers necessarily want. I think that it made sense last year to kind of get a little bit of shooting replacement for Buddy when they traded Buddy, and it was an expiring contract, so you really weren't losing a whole lot there. It made a little bit of sense. I think he was more understanding and accepting of his secondary role than Buddy Hield was coming off the bench. So it made sense why they did go after him to try to get some more shooting. But I think at this point, if I'm Indiana, there's no reason for me to bring him back, especially seeing that he was getting minutes over Jarris Walker, and he might agree to playing behind Jarris Walker. But what happens if Jarris Walker struggles in the first couple of games of the season? All of a sudden, they're going to go back to Doug because he's consistent and they know what he can do. So do you really want to put that opportunity there for the coaching staff to maybe play somebody else again ahead of Jarris? That's, to me, is the biggest reason why I would not want to bring Doug McDermott back. And then Kendall Brown, you mentioned it. I mean, I was very excited about his potential when they drafted him because when they traded up to get him, I was like, oh, man, this is an interesting player. Really young, really athletic. And I thought maybe he could bring some defense and some size because we just hadn't seen wings on Indiana's team before. They really went out and got Kendall Brown in the draft. And I know it was a second-round pick and it was late, but I think after watching a couple of years of him in developmental basketball, it's not the right play. I mean, maybe he can get better, but I just don't see it with him. He really can't dribble the ball that well. More of a catch and shoot guy, and his shooting's up and down. Sometimes a good defender, right? But not always the greatest. Still just a work in progress. But both those guys to me aren't going to make me lose sleep if they walk away in the offseason.
Yeah, tick more defense would help Kendall Brown quite a bit, but he's been fine, but it hasn't all clicked quite yet. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all carry around different stressors, big and small, and when we keep them bottled up, it can start to affect us negatively. Therapy is a safe space to get things off your chest and to figure out how to work through whatever is weighing you down. For example, it can be helpful for learning positive coping skills or learning how to set boundaries. Therapy empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It's not just for those who have experienced major trauma. If you are thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. Switch at any time for no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Let's go to how I like to order this is the top of the market first, both because we can rule out some people, but not all of them, as I'll surprise you with in a second, Alex. And then we'll get into guys that actually are realistic and make sense. So going off of last year's salary, the top 4 guys that Spotrac lists as, or however you say it, Spotrac, Spotrac, I say Spotrac, it doesn't matter, lists as 3s because I use their list because Paul George was on their 2 list last week. And they have a guy who I'm about to say who I think's a 2 that's on this list. Their top 4 guys from last year's salary are Gordon Hayward, who, my, oh my, did anyone in stock fall farther in the last 3 months of the NBA basketball than Gordon Hayward? DeMar DeRozan, who is a 2 and does not fit well with the Pacers at all. OG Anunoby and Doug McDermott is the 4th highest paid 3 from last year, which I find very funny. And there's better players than that in terms of just basketball talent. Miles Bridges, Patrick Williams has had moments, and I've always been a fan of his. Nick Batum is awesome. Every team he's on somehow. Like, there are good players on this list. TJ Warren, an ex-Pacer, actually had some nice moments too. But at the top, not great. And one of those guys stunk, and one of those guys is a 2 who doesn't make sense for the Pacers. Alex, I get asked this a lot, so let me throw you the Anunoby curveball, and then I'm going to explain why it's dumb. So what I have talked about Paul George, I keep saying the chances are exceedingly low, but not impossible, because he has a player option and can like force his way to a specific location like Porzingis did last year if he wanted. And if that location happened in Indiana, maybe they could figure it out. So Anunoby also has a player option. So someone, in fact, 2 people, DM'd me after I did the Paul George thing earlier this week, and were like, hey, could this happen with Anunoby? Like, could he get to free agency and say, hey, Knicks, I have a really big offer from the Sixers, and I'm going to take it, or I'll opt in if you trade me in Indiana, right? Like, that would be a situation where it would happen. Here's the difference, and why I don't think that that has any prayer of being a thing that would happen, is that Paul George, if he opts in, is adequately paid this year and could extend off of that or get paid next year as a star player. Anunoby's player option is super low, so he's not likely to accept an extension off of that. And so he's more likely to want to get paid a lot more in this coming season right now. That would not be the case for PG. He'd be paid about the same either way. And so Porzingis opted in and then got extended with Boston. PG, that could happen for him too. Anunoby, I guess, could legally be extended, but it'd be way below what he could get in free agency. So is it possible for an Anunoby opt-in and trade to the Pacers and break everybody's mind? Yeah. Is it even kind of worth talking about more than I just did? No, it's not going to happen. But there's the parameters on why it's different than Paul George.
I think OG Anunoby is such a fascinating player because the Pacers clearly Woj reported they tried to trade for both Pascal.
Everybody
and OG.
reported it. It was all, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Was all over the double trade though. Yeah.
I just remember Woj saying it first. I just got to give him props, right? But whoever had it, everybody had it, right? They tried to go in for both. It ended up not working out that way. The Knicks get OG. OG was great for New York when he played with them. I mean, obviously a perfect fit. I don't know exactly how New York's going to pay everybody. They're just going to, keep spending money. But there's been a lot of rumors out there, and I was going to ask you about this because I think you would know this better than I would in terms of how transactions can work when it comes to sign and trade stuff. So let's just play a little bit of.
About to say something that I've literally been texting people about today. I'm very curious to see what you're about to say.
Okay, well, let's see if the Nova Knicks are a real thing, and Brooklyn's like, okay, we're going to trade Mikal Bridges to New York, right? All of a sudden, Indiana's like, let's get in on this. We want OG Anunoby here to Indiana. And Brooklyn goes, okay, we're going to rebuild mode. So Indiana sends salary plus a Mathurin or a Walker or somebody like that gets Brooklyn going on their rebuild a little bit. Could you do a sign and trade with OG to Indiana if it doesn't include like a double sign and trade or things like that with the third team involved?
He could just opt in at that point, but at a reasonable salary that makes sense for him right now. Yeah, so this is very similar to what I was talking to people about and trying to get clarity on, because you can negotiate with your own team now. But a sign and trade transaction, in theory, what is being agreed to is I will sign with you and immediately be traded. So you know where your destination is. It's not like a sign and trade is like a surprise to any player. Yeah. So I would wonder how the league would view that is that guy actually negotiating with another team before the moratorium where he can agree to that deal? Or if they would say, well, he agreed to it with that team and just so happened to be traded, because obviously it takes all the parties being involved at the same time normally. But yeah, so I would be curious about, I was actually talking to people about this specifically today in terms of what it would look like at the draft, trading a free agent, your own free agent right now. But yeah, I would think the gray area is too gray and they would view that as a tampering, but I understand that it's a good question.
Who would be hit with the tampering?
Well,
Pacers?
Yes, because so again, the way that a sign and trade actually would be structured in a contract is you sign a contract with the Knicks and it's only an allowable contract that it's voided in X number of days if you're not traded to another team. And so there's no way for the Pacers to have that contract with OG Anunoby prior to the moratorium starting on June 30th. So if it happened before June 30th, you'd say, oh no, that means OG Anunoby technically would have had to talk to the Pacers. Now you could wink, wink and say, no, he agreed to that with the Knicks and just so happened to stumble upon this realization that this other team was possible. So I think the gray area is too gray right now.
Yeah.
But I do understand why that's why I was asking people. I was like, this is very interesting to me.
It is interesting to me, and I think if Indiana has all these second-round picks in their pocket, like, could they be willing to forfeit one of those up? I mean, it's not like they need all these players on their roster anyway, and I'm not trying to sit here and say poor guys that have to lose their, draft position because of a dumb forfeiting of the pick because of all the stuff that's tampering versus not tampering when everything is tampered anyway in the league, and it's such a gray area, like you said. But could they even push this, to June 1st, or excuse me, July 1st? Could they push that sign and trade back just because, it could work out that way since he is their own free agent, right? The Knicks' own free agent, and everybody else would already be on their rosters for Indiana and Brooklyn if a 3-team deal was supposed to go down.
Those awkward 4 days where everybody's covering a draft pick that's not actually going to be staying in a specific market. Yeah, it's really odd. And I was CBA digging with some people today. I'm going to guess right now that it's not allowed.
Yeah.
Unless it has no draft pick involvement, but it is very interesting. I wondered too, for those who are interested in Cap Dorkery, how willing, right? Because you could trade the MLE now. So the player that made me think about this is Rashawn Holmes. Because you don't know what the cap's going to be at for next season yet. So you don't know what the MLE is going to be either. So what if a team agrees to a draft night trade that involves trading a player into the MLE, but then the cap comes in lower and it's not actually a legal trade at all? He doesn't fit. How would that be handled among the two teams? So I think all these new rules, especially this year at the draft, I'll be fascinated to get some clarity on this stuff. Anyway, and what we should have said before we spent 5 minutes on nonsense, that I like the nonsense, to be clear, is OG is not coming to the Pacers.
Don't kill our hopes, man. Come on. There's still time. It's still possible. There's like a 1% chance, but anything is possible.
So to pivot to thing 2 after OG, because he's a player option, people asked about it. Who to you on this list? I have 3 names, maybe 2.5 names. Who to you on this list is worth more than that non-taxpayer mid-level number the next season? It's not a very high group.
What is the non-taxpayer mid-level again? Is that 12.8?
Little under 13.
Okay, so if we're just looking at the top of the list, right? I mean, obviously DeMar DeRozan, OG Anunoby, Patrick Williams, right?
Patrick Williams is in my over that group, but he's Alex, you don't know this yet. He's going to be the thumbnail for this video because I'm very high on Patrick Williams.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick Williams is a very interesting player, right? He's somebody that he's restricted, so that's why I kind of didn't even look at him as an option, because Indiana was like, we're done with restricted free agents, right? Like they said that last year, like we don't want to do that anymore after the whole DeAndre Ayton fiasco. So I would say those 3 are my top 3 that I think are going to get that.
Oh,
Miles Bridges probably could get it.
Yep, he is the last one that I thought.
So, I mean, obviously some weird stuff that he did off the court, right? But I think that him playing last year, people have slowly kind of moved on from that. I think he'll get paid. Other than that, nobody else on this list, like I said, would really make a lot of sense to me to get more than that.
So let me just say some names that are probably not worth more than the MLE, but are in Tony's eyes good. Kelly Oubre, who I don't particularly love as a player, is certainly worth way more than the minimum and was much better for the Sixers than I anticipated. I wonder how high he gets, if he could get close to that. And the other player I like, this will be an interesting one to me, Sam Hauser.
Interesting.
Sam Hauser, a $10 to $15 million player, or am I just fully Celtics pilled and he just fits in really well there? Because the finals are going on. I don't know. Sam Hauser, pretty good. Pretty good. He's a team option. I don't know what they're going to do there. Very interesting. So I only ask you for that list to say the no doubt guys, Miles Bridges, DeMar, and Anunoby, they're out. Anyone else, in theory, the Pacers have the means to acquire at this position. There are some good players. So let's pivot. One more break here, guys, so we can talk about FanDuel. Summertime is here. It's beautiful out, and that means baseball. That means the Stanley Cup Finals. That means the NBA Finals, and you can bet on it all at FanDuel. Right now, if you're a new customer and you hop on over to FanDuel, you can get $200. How about that? In bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 you can use to bet everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit it out of the park, Stanley Cup champions, all sorts of it, the spreads, the money lines, the player props, everything you like is over there on FanDuel. But you got to visit FanDuel.com/lockdown to get that offer of $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. FanDuel.com/lockdown. Add a big win to your summer bucket list on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Let's talk realistic targets. And remember the parameters at the beginning. If they're better than Nesmith, they're probably unaffordable. If they're worse than Nesmith, they have to be worth burying a young player for. And if they're not worth burying a young player for, they're probably not going to play. So then they have to be a veteran who's okay with not playing and taking guaranteed money. Does anyone fit all those criteria to you or sneak into any random group that you might happen to like?
Oh, man. I mean, one name that maybe sticks out to me a little bit is Nicholas Batum.
Yes.
I like him. I think he's good. I think he kills the Pacers every time they play him. And he's just he's 35 years old, I believe. So he's getting up there in age. But I still think if he were to accept a third string role, this is a guy that would end up playing a couple of games because of injuries. And I think he would actually be good when he came into the game. It wouldn't be like you'd be taking a step back. So I actually like Nicholas Batum as a potential guy to fit that kind of bill, what you're trying to fit here. I think I would like him over McDermott because it gives you more passing and more defense too. So that would be the first guy on my list if you're looking at someone to kind of fit all that you're trying to fit there.
He's great. I do wonder a couple of things. One, is he going to retire? He's hinted at that before. That obviously rules him out. Two, is he too good to take a 0-minute role at this stage? Because he was like good for Philly at that end of the season. Not like, oh, this veteran guy's surprising. Like, oh my God, this guy's one of the best 5 players in a first round series level of good. And he turns 36 next season. So who knows how much longer he has that. And he has 16 years in the NBA, which is insane. But I do wonder, he would be one that would be awesome. Let me talk about Patrick Williams for a second.
Okay.
Look, if he left the Bulls, I think a lot of Bulls fans would be like, he's been a big course of debate there. That's generally a litmus test of like how good a player is how beat up the old fan base is about a guy leaving. Every time I watch the Bulls, this guy makes half his threes. He's at 41% for his career, albeit on low volume. Moves kind of well. Like, I get he makes some dumb mistakes. I can't quit a guy with that level of movement and shooting. And he's 22 now. Or did he turn 20? No, he's still 22. He turned 23 in August. Like, this dude's comically young. If he is even possibly available for the mid-level exception, which would make no sense, the Bulls should match that immediately. I might think about how my team looks if I'm the Pacers for that. But that is just me. Like, I would think about playing him at the 4 even. He could do that.
Oh.
Can I move top and up a position? And then it's just he's on this list, and I really like him, even though he might not be that great.
Yeah, no, actually, when we were looking through names and I looked at him, I said, well, he'll probably make more than the mid-level. Like, that to me is kind of what I thought. Like, probably 15 to 18 range is what I was thinking potentially for him. And you're right, 22 years old, fellow Virgo here. We both have late August birthday, so that's great.
There you go.
Love to celebrate that with him. But yeah, I mean, he'd be a really great piece to bring on here in terms of just trying it out. Could almost be like Obi Toppin was last year. I think they're in the same draft class, right? Same draft class?
2020, yes. Yes, and it is the Pacers' mission to own the entire 2020 lottery. So that also makes Patrick Williams.
Yeah, I mean, I did see Jordan Morris on this list once again, so they could bring him back.
More 2020 guys, that's the plan, right?
Reassemble the 2020 group. But no, I mean, in terms of a player, though, like, there's a lot of upside there. And I think that Chicago, to me, has been such an up and down team in terms of just, like, trying to figure out what direction they're trying to go. And I wonder if Indiana would maybe be a better fit for him in terms of just maybe playing a little bit faster, playing with Tyrese, more of a pass-first point guard, and then being, next to Myles at times, a guy that can spread the floor from the 5. And I know that Vooch can do that as well, but just a different big. So I don't know. I like the fit. I think it'd be interesting.
Yeah, and there's this whole element of wings to, like, if Obi leaves or doesn't re-sign.
Yes.
If they could play the 4, even better. Patrick Williams basically only plays the 4 for the Bulls. Yeah. So, anyone who fits kind of that group, Batum, I mean, a lot of these guys can play both positions, but even Batum can do that. There's this interesting crew of, like, slightly worse than, or maybe significantly so, worse than Aaron Nesmith, but certainly rotation quality, which is basically just a no-go for this being a marriage. Like Derek Jones, Caleb Martin, Jason Tate, I believe, is a team option, so I doubt he leaves Houston, but he's in that group. Chetty Osman's probably definitely worse than Nesmith, but might just be a vet no contributor now, but he's only 29. He's probably looking to play. So that kind of brings us down to the vet group. Unless you think there's someone else who's a good age that could, in theory, play that I'm missing. Miles Bridges is probably worth too much at this stage, so I skipped over him.
I don't know how you feel about this guy, but I like him. Simone Fontecchio.
Oh, yes. He is good.
He's restricted, though, so it's
He's
kind of one of
restricted
those
is
things.
why I glossed over that, yeah.
Yes, but I mean, if they could get him, like, he would really be fighting for minutes, I think, because he shot the ball so well. I think he was
Broken
like,
shoot it, yeah.
yeah, and he was like 15 points a game last year for Detroit when he got traded. So, like, that's I think a guy that could actually really help this team in terms of their rotation. Like, he'd be a very hard player to keep out of the rotation. So, it's one of those things where it's like maybe you could find a spot for him, but it'd be really hard, I think, to get him actual minutes based on everybody else that you want to get minutes that's already on the roster.
What about one of Tyrese Haliburton's good friends, Shea Brissett?
Yeah, I don't know if he'd get minutes, but he's not getting them in Boston either. So he'd be a nice vibe guy, right? I mean, that could be somebody on the end of the bench that's familiar with this team, right? There wasn't a lot of roster spots last year to bring him back. I think one name on this list that would just be so fun in terms of the theatrics and the antics.
Oh boy.
Just imagine this guy on the Pacers sideline instead of the Milwaukee Bucks sideline. Thanasis Antetokounmpo. I mean, I don't want him on the team. He's not good enough, but how funny would that be for storyline purposes if you're a WWE fan? Like, this is exactly what you would like a heel turn for Thanasis would be pretty interesting.
It would be. If we're talking about names like that, I'll let me throw Jacob Toppin in on a two-way as a fun one. Reunite the bros.
Hey, the Pacers are all about the brothers, right? The Davis brothers back in the 90s, and then you got obviously the Hansborough brothers. You had the Rush brothers. Let's get the Toppins in here. Holiday brothers. The TJ brothers, right? You know, that was a little bit of a first name joke there, but the Hills, we had the Hills at one point.
So the vet crew, and McDermott could legitimately be in this group I'm about to describe, but I think at his age, he might be looking for either more money or more chances to play. Is this group that would be next to me? Because there's a lot of, like, we've skipped over saying some names because either they're not very good, they're going to be too expensive, or they're just not worth talking about, or they're injured in Sadiq Bey's case. But there's the next kind of crew of guys to me that is older, not very good or not playing that much anymore, but still has value to a franchise either because of their experience, because they have like a niche skill that's very good, something like that. You know, the top of this group in terms of what they made last year is Joe Ingles, who has a team option that I would imagine will get declined as the Magic pursue their cap space dreams, right? He can kind of shoot it. He can really pass it. He is pretty slow, but not an invaluable player to teams. And there's a lot more names. I'm not going to read all of them, but like Jay Crowder, he's probably going to play for someone next year. Reggie Block didn't play very much last year. There's a lot of these kind of guys. And that's kind of what I think the sweet spot is for the Pacers, especially if they kind of think about the tax, like if the obvious stuff happens and they just re-sign Toppin and Siakam. This kind of feels like the most realistic group to me, even though it's the most boring because they have some utility, but I would be accepting of a guaranteed contract that came with very low minutes.
Yeah, I mean, would you throw Torrey Craig in that group too?
Yeah, he played a lot and has a player option. I'd be curious what he's thinking about this summer. He's not even 30 yet, is he? Oh, he's way
33.
Wow,
yeah,
I'm way off. Yeah, he could probably play. He could probably be the ninth guy in a lot of teams, but he would also fit the category I've described.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you want someone that you can rely on to be a good locker room presence, a guy that can play potentially if there are injuries, but not someone that's going to be eating into minutes of your young guys' development. I think that's the big thing here, trying to find that perfect person. And, you know, they could, like Joe Ingles, like that could be an interesting name if it was on the veteran minimum, right? So like a guy that did a very good job with kind of mentoring some of those guys in Orlando as well, just a true pro, right? True vet. But, you know, at that same point, you already have someone kind of filling that role in James Johnson if you bring him back. So what is the significance of bringing somebody here in the small forward spot that could, you know, take up a roster spot where maybe you could do better elsewhere? Maybe you could even use the 36th pick in the draft to draft somebody like this. It's a little bit younger, but knows that they're going to have to work to get those minutes versus bringing in a guy that maybe, like we just said with Torrey Craig, that feels like I should be in the rotation, right? Like more on the like 10, 11, 12 man spot than 15.
That's why it's such a sweet spot of like, if they played, they would be fine. You know, you would not be upset if they're on the floor, but they're not good enough to get that role from anyone every night, and still worthy of a spot on a team, right? Because generally that player, depending on how old they are, what their position is, might not even get guaranteed money. So like a minimum for the full season is like awesome. You know, that's great news. But then it's like, did you even bother? Do you just do what you said? And like, well, let's just backfill this with a young wing, but then they're not good or
Right.
probably not good, I guess. Ben Shepherd just proved me. Don't say that, but they could be in the playoff rotation next year. But, likely, almost certainly not good. And that's why you'd like to have the vet, right? That's why every year, even when they had Turbonis, you'd get Al Jefferson, Kyle O'Quinn, right? You just never know if the young guys will be ready, and you want the vet just in case. And those guys didn't end up playing very much, but you kind of want to have it just in case, right? That was the theory of signing McConnell when they had Aaron Holiday and Brogdon at the time. Now that turned out to be way different, but like that's a similar kind of line of thinking. So striking that balance is very interesting when young guys are playing. Now, maybe the difference in thinking too is it's not like Aaron Holiday at the time, who was super, like had never played before, or like Sabonis and Turner, who were both really, I guess they were pretty proven, but like Ben Shepherd is young and proven, like this dude can play. So you probably have a lot of confidence already. You're not like, your downside risk is pretty low, but I still think there would be an appeal to someone like this, or even someone maybe a little younger who, that's why I talked about the guaranteed money. Like Lamar Stevens was on the fringes of the NBA this season. Like he's 27, he's fine. Like if he's your 14th guy and barely ever plays, but has a guaranteed minimum deal, you could squeak him in when there's injuries. Like guys like that, I think do have some sense, especially if McDermott and Brown are gone next year.
Yeah, I agree. It's the name that everybody always wants to bring up, I think, for like a veteran guy is Gordon Hayward, just because he's a little bit older from Indiana.
How do we get this far?
I know, 34 years old, and it's like probably is going to get a vet minimum, I would assume, on his next contract. If he gets more than that, I don't know how much more, but like you just fell so out of the rotation with OKC. And I mean, Sam Presti even said like he made a mistake making that trade, which is just so kind of like odd that you would hear a general manager or president like publicly say that. So that's going to be tough. And obviously, Gordon Hayward's wife came to his defense on Instagram and was really just upset with the fact that he didn't get much playing time. And, he took that money in Charlotte instead of staying with Boston, and Boston and Indiana couldn't agree to a sign and trade all the way back. And what was it, 2019 when that thing went down? So it's just kind of crazy that contract is finally over, that he signed for $30 million. And I paid small forward in this group that we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, if he could come to Indiana and be that veteran small forward too, and take a lesser role like he had with OKC, like that would be great. I just don't think, based on how the response came out after he didn't play much with OKC, that's what he's going to want to do. And I think there's still a lot of teams out there that like don't have a lot of cap space that could use him and give him much more playing time than Indiana could. And I think that he would probably prefer a situation like that than being more of a mentor.
Yeah, his stock has certainly torpedoed. I mean, in Charlotte, the most games he played in one season was 51, right? Yeah. So his stock is not high. He was very bad for the Thunder. That said, when he did play, the lowest points per game he averaged for the Hornets was 14.5, and he's 6'7" and can play make. Like, he's going to play for a team. And the Pacers, now, if Obi Toppin is not on the Pacers, Gordon Hayward does become, to me, a very appealing option in terms of like cheap, backfill that spot kind of player. Right. So I wish Hayward honestly was on the 4 list, because then this discussion, I guess we could do it for longer now, because he can play 3 and 4. He's obvious touch sitting. He's I don't know if I want to say good, but he's like acceptably fine at this stage of his career. And I don't know what kind of veteran. I've never read anything about Gordon Hayward, the mentor. And I don't know if a lot of those stories made it out of Charlotte the last couple of years, but if he is good citizen and playing, pick a number, because he got hurt so much, you kind of want to limit it. OKC had him at 17 minutes. Like if he's playing 17 minutes as your backup 4, can occasionally play the 3, that is fine. That's worth probably more than a minimum, truly, because he was kind of good for the Hornets last year.
Yeah,
but I feel like he'll either chase more money or more minutes than the Pacers can offer. But if Toppin's gone, there is at least a decently sized role. And then you have to decide, and I guess I could just ask you, is Gordon Hayward a guy you sign to not play Jarris Walker? Because if Toppin's gone, Jarris would be one of the 10.
Yeah, I think if Toppin were to leave, I think Hayward would be somebody that would intrigue me, because number one, like you just said, 51 games was the most he played in Charlotte. I know that he's probably going to get hurt again. Or you could do load management, so you know that you're going to at least have opportunities there for Jarris to play. The problem is, if Jarris is not ready, can you trust on Gordon Hayward to be reliable for you in that smaller role and give you those minutes? I think that he would actually fit well with this Pacers team in terms of the offense. Defensively, I mean, Gordon Hayward, I don't think at this point is going to be that great of a defender, but I do think that he's going to help with the offense and fit the flow of the team very well, very smart basketball player. So would fit what this team needs. And if Obi leaves, you're definitely taking a step back, in my opinion, if you bring Gordon Hayward in to replace him, just because of how well Obi fits this team. But
Agreed.
it is a better option than fully trusting Jarris if he's not ready. Now, if Jarris all of a sudden it just becomes, a really good player in year 2 and really cuts back on all the gambles that he did and just plays solid defense and is really good, okay, then there's a lot of development there. But if you're trying to continue to make the playoffs and have a playoff push, relying on Jarris to be your backup 4 in a second year where he really didn't play much in his rookie season is a little bit scary, I think, if you're a front office trying to assemble a team together. So I don't know what the exact number would be for Hayward. I think I would probably want to do something maybe where it's got a team option on the second year. I don't know how much you would give him. That's the big question. Is it closer to like the $7 to $10 million range if you're trying to get him some, to get him to come to Indiana to play the backup 4, or would you rather go to somewhere that has more of a championship level opportunity and play backup 4 there, but make less money?
Yeah, he was an all-star in 2016-17, has played more than 52 games in a season since then once. Like, that's crazy. That Paul George was on the Pacers that season. Like,
yeah.
That was a long time ago. You
Wow.
know, so there's a lot of downside risk there. Again, he's good. He would fit very well if Obi was gone. I think, man, I don't know. They just made the conference finals. It's not so stupid to say. I think I personally would opt to just give the keys to Jarris at that point. It's close. Like, this guy just averaged 14.5 for the Hornets last year. Like, he's good. I don't know. That one will be fascinating. It could require other moving parts because I don't think he's ready for a no minutes, no money situation. He was too good for that at times.
Yeah, it would be one of those things, like I just kind of said, just laid it out a little bit, but like he maybe starts out as a backup 4, gets hurt. Jarris comes in, plays really well. Then Gordon doesn't end up getting a spot back. Maybe he's a guy you trade.
And then he's furious that he chose, this opportunity, right? There's a lot of risk there.
Yeah. Or if they made a trade, you never know. If they made a consolidation trade, all of a sudden it opens up another spot for a guy to play, something like that. I'm not saying they will make a consolidation trade, but you just never know. Like, if the right opportunity presents itself, they got to trade 3 for 1, something like that. All of a sudden now Gordon Hayward being a guy that's in the rotation off the bench can make some sense if you're trying to keep a team together that can at least be competitive, and obviously competitive, but more competitive with a bench unit that's a little bit more stable than a unstable bench unit.
Let me just do the sports fan thing and just name some names of players that I think are good, and if they end up on the Pacers, that's fine, but probably wouldn't get any minutes. Kessler Edwards, since his Nets days, always had a small affinity for him. Najee Marshall, probably looking for money or minutes somewhere, but always at least sort of been a fan of him. Admiral Schofield, I've always been a fan of. TJ Warren was one of my favorites to cover when he was with the Pacers, and he was in the exact role we just described, that vet, no minute, but can fill in kind of role for Minnesota. And Yuta Watanabe, I bet, is going to play overseas from now on, but again, always had a soft spot for him. I think that's everybody worth bringing up here.
Yeah, nothing else really to add to what you said. I think we've pretty much touched on everybody in this list at some point. So, yeah, I definitely feel the same way, though.
It'll be interesting to see. One of the most interesting positions because of their depth, because it's maybe their weakest spot in the starting 5. And because this player could, in theory, someone that is a good 3 could play the 4 and fill Toppin's shoes or play down a spot in some cases, perhaps the position the Pacers would be most willing to invest resources in this summer, and why I needed someone else to bounce these ideas off of. Alex, thank you very much for joining me today. Where can people find you, your work covering the Pacers, including chatting with me for some reason this week?
I still loathe having to come on these podcasts with you and do these interviews. Right?
I'm not going to put it in the intro like you, but
yeah. We actually hate each other. So this is just all for the publicity, ladies and gentlemen. So a little bit of a crossover here, Locked On Pacers, setting the pace, two Pacers podcasts out there that are doing this on the reg. So, we have to spread the love a little bit, but I will say setting the pace where you guys can find us at, go into our summer schedule where we're just doing 3 days a week. So Tony's still keeping up with 5 for a while. So you guys will have those Tuesdays and Thursdays without us to just hear Tony's lovely voice, and the Caitlin Cooper stuff has been awesome. I've really enjoyed that. So those series have been fun, and I appreciate you coming on ours. And of course, being asked to do this one, it was a lot of fun. Our episode that we have coming out Wednesday is free agents as well. We just did our top 5 free agents. Me and Fachi gave each of our 5 free agents to talk about. And I will say there is a little bit of overlap from this conversation with what we talked about, but there is some stuff that me and Facci touched on that we didn't touch on here. So if you want to check that out, please do so.
Does you can't, it's not out yet. Are you going to ruin it? Does that top 5 list include Pascal Siakam, or are those guys ineligible?
Well, those guys are already like,
okay,
they're assumed to be back, right? We kind of set everything up like we preface it like non-Pacers that you could bring in type of thing.
Top
right?
5: Pascal Siakam, James Johnson, Doug McDermott, Kendall Brown, and Obi Toppin. That's
I don't know if I put Doug McDermott in my top 5, but okay.
That would be an extremely boring podcast for everyone.
Yes.
Thank God you did not do that. Yes, Caitlin, to keep going on, and Alex said we'll be back Friday. We're going to do centers. I think I already said that. So I have Isaiah Jackson and Jalen Smith stuff to dig into. She has Myles Turner's really fun. Tomorrow's just me. I'll do talking about some of the lesser free agency stuff for Pacers players and the 2 big time rumors that we've gotten in a little more detail about the Pacers and their free agency thinking. Although, of course, they're both about internal players. Check out Setting the Pace. Alex and Facci do a great job. Chad Buchanan, the general manager of the Pacers, 2-parter on Setting the Pace with lots of great nuggets in there as well. More than we got into at exit interview, certainly. So absolutely worth your time. Again, back tomorrow talking nonsense. Back Friday talking not nonsense and real basketball with Caitlin. Till then, everybody, have a great day. Give Alex a follow. But also, to add in, at Alex Golden NBA on X. Thank you all for listening. See you very soon.